So Kevin, I'll go ahead and answer any questions the best I can.
Well, I'd like to ask, I'd like to make a comment and then ask you a question.
Sure.
I've lived in Shore Acres a long time, and I'm not an engineer by any means, but I can tell you that runoff water is one of three types of water that we get in our roads here. Runoff water is not the main problem in Shore Acres for flooding. The second would be the daily backup through the drain system of salt water that people drive through on a daily basis. We're driving through salt water to get to our homes. And then, of course, when there's a storm surge, it's also tidal and it's salt water. So this is the issue that I think needs to be addressed. And I don't believe the city is looking into this like they should. I think we need to have a study done on what we can do to mitigate and prevent saltwater intrusion into the neighborhood. The water, the rainwater runoff, I don't believe our neighbors are going to feel that that's as big a deal as the seawater rise at this time. So what's the city doing in that regard?
So you ask a very good question, and I will help try to, provide as much guidance and information on this as I can. So when the city was originally developed, there were multiple major drainage basins. So think of a major drainage basin, and then within it, if you cut a golf ball and you lay it flat inside that basin, you have all those little inverse dimples. All those little dimples are the minor basins within that major drainage system. Now, a lot of those just connected directly from side streets into through the seawalls, through easements. Now, this is one of the challenges because you have multiple locations. Now, everywhere, there are ways to mitigate that tidal flow coming in. There are ways to mitigate that, and it's called a backflow preventer. Now, going back to the beginning of the discussion, I mentioned even a prune from a palm tree. A plastic bottle can keep that backflow preventer open enough that seawater can come back into your system. So that's why it's important to keep the system clean, but also the extreme amount of outfalls, direct outfalls that we have, just 2 catch basins and a direct outfall, a few catch basins and a direct outfall. It is time consuming. It's a lot of operations, a lot of maintenance, and a lot of our systems that we have are in easements. It's covered, built over in some cases. So it's very difficult to get to. So what the Stormwater Master Plan is looking at, and some of the projects we're pulling ahead right now, as an example, Butterfly Lake. That is a perfect example right now because that flooding is tidal. It is tidally influenced. So what we're looking to do is, and I use a term right now, taking control of our destiny. I've been telling that to the stormwater engineers. Let's limit those points that as much flow could come in through those outfalls. And it's unfortunate, but we'll have to start to look into pumping systems because our roadways are a specific elevation. And for us to avoid that, we're going to have to actually force that water out. So, twofold. We're going to try and limit our points of failure because we can't rely on backflow preventers everywhere. They can still fail. And then 2, we'll try to combine systems as best as possible to mitigate and only have limited amounts of direct discharge. Does that help you, Gary?
Yeah, it's a move in the right direction. Let's put it that way. We're curious to see what that master plan is going to include in that regard. And, when is that going to happen? We probably don't know that answer. And what's the cost of that going to be? But I just want to read one of the questions from the chat from Chris McNally. Why are there no back check valves at the pipe outlets at the seawalls?
So that's where I was mentioning the backflow valves. We do have a process of going through and installing as best as we can. However, we do have some structures that are square structures. It's easy. We can easily get round backflow preventers. But when you get into the square structures that are 66-inch in diameter, you literally have to construct a manifold and then attach the backflow preventers. But when you do that, you get a lot of hydraulic head loss now. Because during a storm event now, the backflow preventers have smaller diameters and you have vertical walls between them. So that major capacity you had in that box culvert is now cut by having multiple smaller pipe sections with a backflow preventer. So again, because of that head loss, now you start to see more staging on the street. So where we can install backflow preventers, we're definitely moving forward on it. There are some locations because it is connected to such a big box culvert system, by putting backflow preventers will inadvertently increase the staging of the water and create more flooding. So yes, we do review those situations. We do analyze it, and I'm trying to find a quick image that I could try to pull up. But if I do pull it up, I'll ask Liz, I'll probably send it to you to see if you could pull it up for me. As well as the master plan, since you did ask that question, the current schedule that we are on, we're looking to have the presentations, as I mentioned, in the December timeframe to all of the city. Different quadrants, we'll do each quadrant, 4 quadrants we're planning on doing. We're planning a virtual meeting at this point. And then coming up into January timeframe, we will then move forward with committee of the whole meetings in that timeframe. We're still confirming scheduling for that. Now, this is a partnership project with SwiftMud, so they are actually reviewing the model. I can tell you that this model that we've developed is one of the most detailed model that SwiftMud has ever run. The model, last time we ran the draft model, it ran for 4 days. That's how big the model is. And the reason it's so much in depth, the previous model that was done in 1998, if we got a call from a resident for flooding at a location, we would have to run a model for that entire base. Well, this model now, we have increased the amount of assets and sub-basins from about 1,000 to over 12,000. So what does that allow us to do is, Gary, if you call me or Kevin calls me, even Dr. Bob, and says, I have flooding on my specific street, we can look at that specific basin and see what's going on. We can look at the rain event, how it affected that specific basin. So it gives us a higher level of accuracy. But what it also does, it does not make us over design for something that we did not need specifically for that neighborhood. So we can design specifically, it's much more cost effective, but it's not an over design. So as it relates to cost, within the CIP right now, you would see that there are master plan projects already budgeted. So again, we're trying to build those funds in anticipation for the master plan projects. But the other purpose of us starting these elements early is that we can do what we call preliminary design reports. By doing preliminary design reports up front, that allows us to pursue either state or federal funding, because now we have a defined project. As opposed to just going after a grant for a regular project, we have a defined process. We know what we want, and this is what we want to build. So we're looking as best as possible to offset as much of the revenue as we can, but there's still need for the stormwater fees that help fund these projects.
Does anyone else have a question for Brajesh specifically regarding flooding?
Yes. I have a quick question.
Brian first.
Scott.
All right.
Yes, thank you. What you said there about being able to check individual sub-basins for flooding and not over-engineer for those particular areas. Is this master plan taking into consideration future potential flooding problems? I mean, as new builders come in and build new big houses and raise property levels, they're going to increase water runoff and overwhelm the systems that you're currently planning to be just right. We see the same thing as far as traffic and highways, where we plan ahead and widen them to 4 lanes, but 10 years later, they need to be 6. Are you guys taking things like that into consideration with this plan as well, so that we don't have to revisit this in 15 or 20 years?
So very good question, Brian. So a stormwater master plan gives you the intention of where it gives you the high level of what your conduits in your system needs to be. Once you pull that project out and you start advancing it as a specific project, then you should model it based on current conditions, your current tailwater condition and your current rain analysis and your current what we call topographic data. So yes, so even though the master plan will identify all these projects, when we actually come to implementing these projects, any individual one, each project is pulled forward and then we update that specific basin for that based on current condition. Now, as it relates to developments, twofold. Quantity and quality, that is in the code. They are required to maintain storage within their site. Now, I will also tell you, and they're not allowed to increase runoff more than a pre-existing condition. I will also tell you when we get into major developments, we make them model how much they're going to provide, they're going to end up inputting into our system as a part of the right-of-way permit. So yes, so if there are downstream impacts, that is taken into consideration. Also,
and if I can add in on that, and Scott may want to jump in, we just updated our floodplain management ordinance. We have very specific limits on fill on a property and what can be brought in. It's basically for the foundation itself. An entire property is not allowed to be filled. And Scott might want to talk a little bit more about that, but that is a significant component of our floodplain management system, and helps to get us that CRS rating and those discounts. And one other thing Brej didn't mention, I know it's part of his plan, are sea level rise projections. And that is a integral component. You know, what's going to happen over the next 15, 20, 25 years? How is that going to affect flooding, and how is sea level rise going to have an impact? So that's a part of everything, the planning level, the policy level these days, and making sure that we have that data, that input in our future design.
thank you, Liz. You beat me to that. I was going to mention it does cater for sea level, right? And we also, yes, thank you. And I'm going to send you a picture now if you don't mind sharing it once you get it.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Brajesh, I made you a co-host, so you can share it if you want to.
Oh, okay, thank you. Greatly appreciate it. Okay. I have too many windows open, sorry.
While he's doing that, Travis, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. And, you know, so what are we looking at as far as timeframes? Let's say everything falls into place with this master plan. What are we looking at as far as timeframes for any kind of improvements to the Shore Acres area in general? Because I've been here for 14 years and I've heard all about these plans and all about these potential monies that are going to be spent. And to be honest with you, I haven't really seen any kind of adjustments or improvements. So, you know, are we looking at 3 years? Are we looking at 5 years? What are we looking at as far as getting some kind of system implemented to work on obviously the situation that this community has had for, you know, 20, 30 years?
So,
Sorry.
So yes, I do hear concerns, and I can assure you that if you look at the CIP plan as it is, and as we put forward each year in the most recent years, you would see those stormwater master plan projects identified. And again, that's primarily funded from the stormwater utility rates. But you could definitely see these projects identified moving forward right now. And again, these are projects that we advanced from the stormwater master plan. These are ones we know definitely we have to get done. As it relates to time frame, we have already, one of the earlier projects we completed was Snell. And unfortunately, stormwater projects are not as simple as a sanitary sewer or a water main. Stormwater projects require curb-to-curb construction. It is the complete reconstruction of the site. So I can tell you definitely that we're moving forward. And thank you, Liz, for pulling that up, all the improvements that we've done. So yes, there's quite a bit of improvements that you would not see that were done. But we are moving forward right now on some specific projects on Appian Way as well as on Connecticut, and another one on, and I'm sorry, I'm always directional challenged when I drive around. So I'll just pull up the name. So we have the Delaware area, and we have another one that is connected on, it's not pulling up the street for me right now, but it's just south of Delaware on that discharge point heading out through the bay. I believe it is, actually, I don't have the name, sorry. But we do have those major projects specifically in those known flooding areas.
I appreciate your effort and your response. It's just been frustrating, but I get it 100%. And once again, I commend you on your efforts to try to improve our area and the city in general.
Liz, I'm sending it to you because when I try to share, because I have 3 monitors, it's not working too well.
Okay, I'm keeping my eye out for it, Raj.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So this is a good example of our combined approach and how the impacts are going to, what improvements we're looking at. So you all are going to sneak peek of the presentation I'll be doing. So still a lot of spell checking, so I'll be working on that.
All right, I'm getting close.
While we're waiting on that, does anyone else have a question regarding flood?
Raj, is this just the one image or is this an actual presentation?
It's an image from the draft presentation I'm preparing. I have a lot of notes, as I said, strike throughs and stuff on the presentation. So what this shows is the image on the right that was asked, I believe, by Brian earlier on the backflow preventers. That is a backflow preventer on the right. You would see how, even though, just picture that, let's say it's even a 24-inch pipe, you would see how much head loss in velocity of water, the volume of water you're losing by putting that in. If you look on the backside, you'll see that stage, how much water that is staged up on the front end. Now, also, if you just have a plastic bottle stuck in there, that allows storm seawater to come in and then flood the street. The image on the left is what I termed, trying to take control of our destiny as best we can. While we may have those discharge points for the regular day-to-day, putting in those stormwater systems as best as pump stations as best as possible to handle those peak flows and major storm events. So Travis, hopefully this can help you as to how we're looking to try our best to move forward.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
So Brajesh, I think one of the questions you're going to get possibly in the future is every day we drive through salt water. And most of us who live here know where those locations are. Are you looking for those locations to mitigate that backflow?
Yes. So twofold. We don't, and I think I've mentioned it at 1 or 2 of the other presentations I've done. I've heard in the past, when you live in a neighborhood, we can come in because we can model something as best we can based on the older data that we had on the models. They were bigger. They were not as detailed. So what happens is we'll go in, we'll design for that specific basin that we heard there was flooding issue. We went out, we did the analysis, we went out, we got pictures, and then we will find out, hey, there's more flooding just up the street, it goes towards what I've been encouraging people as best as possible in any neighborhood meeting I do, put it in see, click, fix. Once you put it in see, click, fix, we are taking that data and calibrating it with the tide level or any rain event. And we're using that to calibrate the model when we run the model. So if you take a picture and we can know that that was, yesterday at 4 p.m. at this intersection, we can estimate the depth. So when we run the model now, what we can do is basically set that model and drive it to 4 feet and do that 4 inches and do that validation. So if the model says, no, there was only 2 inches, we know we have to do some tweaking, some updating, some correcting on it. So yes, that will help us. And it will also help us in the short term. But right now, I will tell you that Huntington, that entire area, all of them are connected into one major 12 by 7 box culvert. So if we can fix that solution that we're looking into right now by splitting and disconnecting that from Butterfly Lake, that will have tremendous benefit in that area.
Okay, so you're suggesting that anytime it floods in the street, we take a picture, residents take a picture of the flooding in the street and put it in SeeClick Fix.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are using that data. We are using it. And you could just say for stormwater data, I don't know if I've lost everyone.
Okay, somebody had their hand up and I don't see it up now.
John has his hand up.
John?
Yes. One question for you. Understand the cleaning of the storm, one of the things that we can do on our end. If you live on a property, so my property is on Butterfly Lake, is there any maintenance or anything I need to do on the water side? Because the storm drain, the inlet into the storm drain, I believe is on the back end of my property. See what that's cleared out as well. Thank you.
Okay, I will try my best because your voice was breaking up, but I believe you're asking if there's any maintenance you have, if you live on Butterfly Lake, if there's any maintenance you can do to benefit, I guess, the neighborhood. Now that system connects by a box culvert flowing into Butterfly Lake. Butterfly Lake is tidal. So there's not there's smaller drainage structures on the roadway, but they connect to an underground larger box culvert that flows through an easement. So cleaning of it is going to be beneficial with rain events, but that is a tidal system.
We have a question from Leslie.
Hi, thanks. My question is a little more general. I was wondering if the plans that you're referring to are published for public review or access, and if so, where would we find them to be able to read through it and understand what the plans are in detail?
So the capital improvement plan is part of the budget book, and that is line items of the projects. The stormwater master plan is in development, and right now it is in a what we call an ICPR stormwater model. So it's a type of database, but it's not at the point that we've actually laid out specific projects and plans and conduit sizes. We are doing that right now. So in December, when we come out to the neighborhood presentation, we'll be able to provide a little more information before we take that and then finalize those project plans. But we're not at the point, but definitely once it comes to having the stormwater master plan completed, it will be a public document.
Okay, so thank you for that. Will there be we have access before you finalize, will we have access before you finalize? And will there be any kind of comment period or Q&A or anything that you can get our input for the plan?
Yes, so part of the, in the month of December, when we come out, we'll be sending out a mailer, but we'll also be requesting feedback at the same time. So you'll definitely have, but we don't want to request feedback before the public meeting because you would not have seen anything. So we want to make sure that we have information that we can provide you so you can review it. But keep in mind, at that point, that's going to be the high level, because if you could picture, we went from 1,000 basins to 12,000 basins. It's going to be a lot of detail to try and show on maps. So it's only when we take that information and go into more detail later on. But the intention is we want to have, of the public meeting, is we want to have expectations from the residents. We want to hear what you want to see out of the level of service. And that's key. Right, Kevin?
Thank you.
You know what? I can pretty much guarantee we want to see no more flooding. Don't know how that's going to happen. Well, while we have you here, maybe you can give us an update on the progress of the bridge on 40th, the rec center maybe, and is there anything planned in the very near future for 62nd Avenue?
So 62nd Avenue, we don't have anything major planned right now, primarily because it is a construction route for the 40th Avenue, as around the 40th Avenue Bridge. So we don't have anything planned right now, but I will tell you that we're trying to combine anything that we have to do with our integrated master plan, because we may have to do upgrades heading into the Northeast plant. So if we're going to do that, we want to make sure and tear that road up at once. That road does need some reconstruction in some specific locations because we are seeing base failure due to the higher level of groundwater conditions. Now, as it relates to 40th Avenue Bridge, construction is going along well. Like anything right now, we are at mercy to supply and demand. So the bigger contractors and the bigger projects are getting the faster demand, but we're trying our best to put our names in and fight for as much as we can get. But we are progressing well. I think the project's looking really good. It is looking really good. So we're looking to probably have the first phase completed before the end of the year, and then we'll be switching to the next side. We'll try to time the sequence of the switch. I hate to say it, around the Christmas time, if we can, only because there'll be less of to and fro for schools. So that will be an easier time to switch from one side to the next. As well as with regards to Shore Acres, had a update meeting today. I think the biggest challenge we're having is probably ordering furniture. It's amazing how much that is in short demand when you need specifics. So that's progressing really well. The building's looking great. I will tell you that it is an impressive facility. So I think you will be very proud of it.
Great. And one last thing, more kind of a selfish thing for our neighborhood. We are in the process of possibly replacing our signage incoming to the neighborhood on 40th, on Overlook, and installing possibly a new one in the 62nd area. We've been told that the sign on Overlook is in a median and cannot be replaced. Is there a way to get a waiver for something that's been there a long time to make an improvement to the neighborhood?
That would be my area. Well, our area, I guess, Brej.
Yeah.
Let me check into that. We did a major update to our sign code about 2 years ago, and we did address neighborhood signs and when they are in the right of way. So I'll work with Brej and his team and I can circle back with you, Kevin, on the potential for that. I wrote a note, so it's a sign and overlook in the median.
Yes, it's technically a median, but it's a triangle.
Yeah.
Mini park.
And are you also working with Susie Ahawk in our?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll check in with Susie and our zoning official, Jenny Bryla, who works on my team and
Great.
his team, and see what we can, what our options are.
Well, thank you for that. Are there any more questions regarding the flooding or anything of that nature? If you don't want to ask it now, post it to the Facebook page. They do monitor our page as well. We allow them to see what you say so that we have a voice with the city. Usually they're very responsive. We've had a lot of calls about potholes, but just use the See Click Fix app. If you see a pothole, and they're usually fixed or corrected within a couple days. Are there any other questions for the city at this time? Yes, sir.
So if I may just add, for Shore Acres, I know some of you all are probably concerned about in the vicinity of the rec center heading north, the pavement cuts. That is the water main we replaced. The water main project is complete. We are just waiting on our DEP clearance for the water main. Then we'll do the service turnovers, and then we'll pave the road. We don't want to pave the road, and in the event we have to go back and replace any sections. So we're very close to closing that off.
Will that require another closure?
Yeah, we'll coordinate that closure, because that would, as best as we can, we'll try to do that and I think what we're trying to do right now is probably do the closure after the morning rush and before the afternoon rush.
There's a message from Sully that at least 22 potholes reported in last 10 days, very few repaired and still open on See Click Fix.
Yes, and I'm gonna ask, because what we have been struggling with is recovering from the month of dead fish pickup. So because of that, every single employee in Public Works, in stormwater pavement traffic operations, even some of my engineers, myself, staff were out there picking up dead fish. So just to let you know, because of that time period of over a month of doing that, we fell behind in maintenance. We did. And it's not easy to catch back up on that process. I will tell you that they're going at such a fast rate right now of doing patches that I was told today in our warehouse, they actually ran out of cold patch asphalt. So we are trying, we'll try our best, but just know that this is not the only location, but within the city, we had to put maintenance, our regular maintenance, on a back step just to address the fish kill and the storm, the prep for after the storms.
Well, Travis has a very good question. Don't know if you guys are involved with this. The construction regarding the school, the new middle school and YMCA on 62nd Avenue. Do you have any information on that at all?
Well, our team has done some preliminary meetings with their design team. They are required to go through a site plan review process before our development review commission. We have not they have not submitted that application, but we're expecting it very soon. When that happens, that will be a public hearing process. So those documents will be available for review and feedback from the community. I'll make sure that the Shore Acres Neighborhood Association is on that notice list and that you get the information when they do submit. I think, Kevin, at the beginning, there were some folks that wanted to hear a little bit about the FEMA grant program. If you have a few more minutes, Scott Crawford is prepared to give a quick overview of that FEMA grant program if there's folks on this call that would like to hear about that.
So what she's talking about is if you have a property that needs to be raised, lifted up to mitigate flooding, there are some grants available. And thank you for being able to answer that question. So yes, please go forward. You say Scott?
This is Scott Crawford. Can everyone hear me?
It's faint.
I think I'm having some technology problems. I'll try to speak up. But yeah, I'll be glad to try to answer any questions anyone may have.
Scott, are we currently accepting applications for this next cycle? I think that's the case, correct?
Yes, we are. We are accepting them. And the applications have to be in before the end of October.
So that's a pretty critical piece of information. Anybody that's interested, make sure you're emailing NOAA to get a copy of that application. It's not completely funded through the grant. I think there is some matching, I believe. Scott, is that not correct?
Yes. The history of those has been that we've had several different types of funding. There have been a few projects that have been funded at 100%, but those are pretty rare these days. The most common one is either a 25-70 split or a 10-90% split.
And I see Dr. Bob has his hand up.
Yeah, I didn't hear the date that Scott said. October what?
October 31st.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you
And
put
just to let
Noah's
you know,
contact info in the chat, please?
Yes, I will do that.
To let you know, a month or so ago, we sent postcards out to eligible properties. You have to have a property that has either had severe repetitive loss or repetitive loss. And if you did not receive a coupon, your property may not qualify for the grants. But you can go ahead and email NOAA anyway, and he can check on that for you.
It's basically the folks kind of in the bowl in the middle where we've had repeated flooding events that are qualifying. And we sent about 1,500 letters out in earlier this month. And so if you got one of those letters, you may qualify. So please contact us if you're interested in potentially pursuing that.
Hi, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is it a competitive program where you're competing with your neighbors?
I was unable to hear the question. If someone who heard it could repeat it for me, I'll try to answer it.
Is it a competitive program where you're competing with another neighbor who's applying also?
Probably not. There's a pretty good pot of money there. Of course, it is limited. There is a cap on it, but I suppose it just depends on how you look at it. I suppose you could say, yeah, it is somewhat competitive, but there's so much money there. I don't think that it could be used up to the point where it's truly a competitive situation.
And I don't believe there's any geographic limits. So as long as you meet all the qualifying criteria, if your neighbor meets them too, it's likely that you both would be granted that, those grants. So it's not like
Absolutely.
a specific number limited to our city, but there's a specific amount of money limited to allotted to our city.
And just to be clear, that's a grant, not a loan.
That is correct. They are grants.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for your presentation.